So this morning's talk was about the five skandhas entering the 6 realms. And this is going to be
Five Skandhas Part 2.
Five Skandhas Part 2. So what do you want to know? Any questions about this morning's? Yeah.
We were talking about the five skandhas enter the 6 realms, and we were talking about the realm of desire, curiosity, and you also talk about how those five skandhas get together and hold hands. If in the curiosity realm the handhold is weaker, if the weather changed and one finds oneself in the hell realm or something, how is there a way to ease the grip?
All those go into the hell realm. So it's five skandhas is this body-mind complex. It's just a way of talking about it. They're hooked together. The body is hooked to, linked to a feeling, which is linked to perception, linked to concept, linked to all the 6 sense fields. It looks like somebody, feels like somebody. Somebody's feeling this. Somebody's thinking this. Somebody's having this difficulty. Somebody's having this happiness. That kind of thing. And then that whole situation, just a way of using that metaphor to say that this whole situation goes into great difficulty or hell or some kind of warfare with other, or the other in here or the other out there. Both seem to be other. And the breakdown seems to be through the sitting practice of meditation, through awareness, so looking at it, not adding on, which causes things to continue to rotate, not subtracting, which causes things to continue to rotate, or ignoring, but just looking at it, we eventually begin to see that something is not exactly solid about this, that it's kind of makeshift. It's not, as I said in the teachings all over the place, it's not real, or it's an illusion, or it's delusion. And so the one who is awake, as far as way of talking about it, might show up in different ways, doesn't seem to is able to just acknowledge the form or just have an awareness of the form, awareness of feelings, without hooking up to anything else. Awareness of perception, sometimes called perception impulse. And they're just categories. They're just ways that at some point, ancient time before the Buddha, even as far as the skandhas, I think the ancient Indian teachings is the source for that. It just seems that someone looked at this with a great deal of insight into the way the human mind, the human presence, what we call a human being, if you look at the parts of it, you begin to see that it's an arrangement of parts. There's the body part, feeling, perception through all the sense fields, through the mind. And then there's the conceptual construct that comes in and kind of brings everything together and makes things, helps things to make sense and seem more real. You know, this is a chair, this is a room, this is a building, these are human beings, these are, and we kind of, everything is bouncing off everything else in order to get its apparent stability or singularity or reality, including the imputation that I am somebody who can win, I am somebody who can lose, I can live, I can die. Seems to be unreal. We're not saying it's not there, but to see that is the body doesn't go anywhere. There's still perception. There's still feelings. There's still conceptual mind running along and thinking about this, what about this, what about that, analyzing, subtracting, adding on, and then there's all of the sense objects, smells, taste, touch, sounds, and so on, all coming back through all of those, kind of going the other direction. The way talked about it, it's like consciousness comes back through the first 4 like a needle. It just goes zip back through. Just again, it's a metaphor. It's a way of probably not doing anything like that. Fundamentally, it's not separate, so we break it down so that we can understand it, like we break down the five skandhas. I mean, the six realms, so that we can get an idea of different states of mind. There's a highly prideful state of the heaven realm. There's the jealous state of the jealous God realm. You know, big jealous, who's ahead, who's behind, how am I doing? There's the human realm, which is kind of existentially at a loss and is curious about everything and is also suffering, is also at the mercy of the grasping and rejecting and passion and aggression and ignorance is swirling around there. And then the state of mind that is characterized by animal. And it's not a put down particularly to anything. It's just a way of saying it's a way of kind of closing down. So animals have a tendency to just look at just what's in front of them. I think in the Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, it's talked about as a pig just snuffling along, doesn't see the clouds or the butterflies or the trees. It just sees the dirt in front of it. Pardon me. So they're just metaphors or images that help us get some kind of idea how that whole thing is operating. At the same time, we feel that we're one singular person. What happens when things change, we think that we're experiencing a change rather than there isn't any, there's just experience. So if we begin to see that, then if we start to freak out or panic, we might want to go see a psychiatrist or a therapist, or we might want to take drugs, or we might want to self-medicate. We might want to what's that other one, sporticate? You go golfing? Is that right? Sporticate? Yeah. I think I'm going to go golfing. I feel so good. I'd rather go out and canoe or jog or mountain bike. Nothing wrong with any of those things. Those things are all wonderful things to do. It's just when you're using something like that to avoid the karma that comes up as your life. So a good way to find out what your karma is sit down, hold still, and watch, and you'll see immediately what you've been avoiding. Or maybe you'll see it in 20 minutes. Or maybe you'll see it in a year and a half, and 2 years. And maybe it'll take some time for the awareness to the consciousness, the hope and fear that comes out of the consciousness, called the seventh consciousness, or the collective mind, or the paranoid mind, as it's described in the Yogacara teachings of the 8 consciousnesses. First five are sense fields. 6 is just the mundane processing part of the mind that synchronizes the consciousness of smelling something with the consciousness of seeing something, so you don't feel like there's somebody else is smelling what you're seeing. This would be what do they call it? Schizophrenia. So, yeah. Yes, Laura.
You mentioned Shirley Trump was metaphor for a needle going through 5 leaves, and that at some point, they kind of get cooked apart so that you can understand that they're different. My question is the experience of that instantaneous or gradual?
It could be a little of each. It is also dependent. Everything that happens is dependently arisen, and the interdependency is so different. There's so many different things happening. It's like you never see two oak trees growing in exactly the same way. They're the ground, the weather, how much sunshine the first year that they're growing. There's so many causes and conditions. Like we're born, and then how we're treated gets combined with where the karma, particular karma that we brought into the world, that is combined with the karma of our parents, with their particular genes and so on. That's included. Everything is so incredibly dependently arisen that you can't find a first source or a first cause for anything. It's just all over. And so, but here's what you can find: this conscious, since it's not separate, then everything that you need to know is right in front of you. Trungpa Rinpoche mentioned that a few times. and saying instead of going back into some kind of past time or some kind of other place, that what you're looking for is right here. Now, you might not be able to see that, so you might have to look at it a lot. So as far as the metaphor of the needle, it's just a way of talking about it. This is how it comes together so that there's somebody. I'm the person who's feeling this way or feeling that. I'm the person who is thinking this or thinking that. When we begin to see that everything is dependently arisen, which is what the Buddha's basic awakening was, seeing everything that looks like a bunch of separate things with their own kind of individuality or autonomy, or praise and blame, or success and failure. The Buddha saw, as far as my understanding of the teaching, the Buddha saw that there wasn't any separate thing. That what he saw was that isn't just one thing, because that's another kind of philosophical problem. But it was not separate. So when you see not separate, you don't actually see one thing. You see everything in its, you have complete respect for every individual thing, in particular for other people. You respect their confusion and their clarity at the same time. Those two are not two different things. You become very clear about your confusion. This is the Buddha did not awaken to clarity. The Buddha awoke to delusion everywhere, deeply, from looking at his mind for what, as the story goes, 6 years. That was his awakening. He saw deeply without missing a corner. There was not one place where there was a dust mote hanging out. He saw it all. And how did he see it all? By looking at what was in front of him. Tayo?
You talk about the discontinuous self. And I'm wondering how that teaching relates with the Five Skandhas. And I guess because when you talk about it, it seems like the heat's come and here they are. It seems like there's something else happening, kind of oscillation.
Well, Five Skandhas are just a way of, here we are. And if you take this experience, you can break it down into there's the feeling of a form, and also forms arising in the mind. It can get very complicated. We're trying to keep it as simple as possible. Form, feeling, perception, sometimes called memory and consciousness. So it's just a way of having that little overlay to lay on the entire experience, and then you can go into each one and see how that functions to reach into the other ones and connect things together. And so when I say discontinuous self, I'm saying the way I like to talk about that is to say that we impute or we imagine or we think that we're one person having lots of different feelings. But when we start to get close to what is actually happening, it looks like there's self for every feeling. There's a different kind of, someone else comes up and is miserable. Someone else comes up and says, finally I'm happy. And there's almost like a happiness that's totally forgotten about 3 hours ago when that same so-called self was totally freaked out and miserable. But if you begin to look at it after a while if you don't push on it, pull on it, or shut down on it, you'll begin to see that there's a little self-orientation applied, or that is just off the side that is actually having that experience. So that's why I call, when I say discontinuous, it's not like there's one thing that's locked down, although it could be it too, but there's a whole lot of little ragamuffins running around having experiences. And when this gets intensified in some ways out of fear or out of the causes and conditions that are difficult to see, which may include even your heredity, it can go into some form of craziness like schizophrenia, psychosis, or something like that. We don't generally use those words. And as practitioners, I'm not going to ignore it, but we don't have to use that because then we have to buy into all the rest of the psychology and what is that about getting better. It's not, the ego psychology is found too many places that it's unreal. And sometimes it's replaced with Atman, like in Indian philosophy.
Are the teachings of the Five Skandhas integrated in the teachings of the 12 links?
Yeah.
And so how does that skandhas relate with that more. I'm trying to connect this discontinuous self with the 12 links.
Well, which one of the 12 links is the Five Skandhas?
Well, don't they go through all 5 of them through the 12 links?
Well, they do, but there's one particular one. You know which one it is? Yeah. Number 4, name and form. Namarupa. So name and form. The form part is the form, and nama is the has a different consciousness. There's only 2 skandhas: there's form and consciousness, and then it shows up in different ways. And so that's the 4th one. The first one being ignorance, and then formations, and consciousness, and name and form. And then what's the next one? 5th? Touching, touch, sparsha. And then the next one is feeling. And the next one is I like it, I don't like it. It's laid out in such a way that we can see how the mind progresses to grasp onto things and reject things and shut down on things. That creates the illusion of there being someone. Go ahead.
So in relation to the discontinuous self, the first link is birth and the last one is death. So are we going through this constant cycle of birth and death as we?
You're dying now. It's just a way of breaking it down. We're not grasping at that and saying this is how it is. We're just saying we're just using that, and then if it runs out of its use, then we don't use it. But we don't. It's not fundamentalism. So these teachings are constantly moving all the time. More?
Can we see the creation of the self as we?
You're watching it. You're watching it right now. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah, you're watching it right now. You think it's something else.
I don't see the gaps between birth and death.
That's awareness. That's awareness. Don't abandon anything. Don't abandon it for something else.
I was not seeing awareness.
How is not seeing awareness?
I said I'm not seeing it. You said that's awareness.
Yes, I did. That you're aware that you're not seeing it. Awareness. There isn't anything but awareness. It's the hope and the fear, the grasping and the rejecting that manifests some kind of someone who's grasping, or some kind of someone who's abandoning, or creating a self out of what? Whole cloth. We do it over and over all day long. We're doing this. We're recreating this.
But if I know I'm not seeing, how is that different than ignorance?
Same thing. Keep coming.
If I know I'm ignorant, then what is ignorance? Like, what is that thing that I know?
You know that you're distracted. There needs to be. It's a relative. This is why we have the provisional teachings. This is why we don't start out with the ultimate teachings, unless we do. Sokuzan is an ultimate teaching that's practiced provisionally. We teach somebody, Sokuzan, sit down, hold still, see reality. But you may have to sit there day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year until you see it. And there's no way I can give you my stubbornness or my energy or my persistence to help you do that, other than saying, you want to know? This is how it's done. And is there some other way? Probably. But I don't know about that way. I just know I spent the better part of my life doing this. It's persistently looking at whatever is arising. First thought, best thought. First thing that rises is it. And it's not going to look like it. It's not going to be, that's a success story. It's probably going to be one disappointment after another until you realize what this is, which is, as Trungpa Rinpoche said, the final disappointment, which is realization itself. Realization is not getting to something or getting somewhere, or having this magical state of mind where, where you're in some kind of a wonderful space called Tushita heaven. Although this has been called the Tushita heaven. Who called it that? Chazan, yeah. So when Nishikai came up here to visit, who's that other girl? Let's say. Chazan called it the Tushita heaven. So it's just Buddhist humor.
Yesterday you talked about the bardos, and the possibility of awakening in the bardos. Is there a bardo between the dissolution, the death of the self, and the rebirth of the self while still in this life? Is there a possibility in that bardo for awakening?
There's bardos everywhere. This is a bardo. There's the beginning, there's the end. Bardos everywhere. Gaps between this and that, this and that, this and that. So the bardo that I think you're asking about would be the Mardo Dharmata. There's different names for it. When you after you die, there's a bardo where you're presented with all kinds of things, and then you're presented with the traditional way of saying, has been said, the clear blue light of the void. And to ego, this is purifying. So ego runs back into new lifetimes. Whereas someone who is realized, I want to put it very literally, goes into it or sees that they're not separate from it. There's no more fear. If you have hope, you're going to have fear. If you're hopeless, you're fearless. If you hope for something else and you're waiting on it, then there's going to be fear that that's not going to happen. I don't mean to be negative, but it just seems to be the truth. More?
I guess I'm referring to this life between the discontinuous selves.
Yes,
self and another self.
It's there in front of you right now. It's there right now.
How can I see it?
Keep practicing. Whatever appears, don't add to it. Don't. Whatever appears, you could even say in perception. Don't add an object to it. This is I'm looking at a chair, and don't add a perceiver to it. I'm the one who's looking at the chair. This is something we do just moment by moment. We're always saying, I'm seeing that. We might not say it literally. But it's so that kind of ignorance that is bound in, or that consciousness that is so spun through the three poisons, just seems like somebody's there. And the Five Skandhas are just another way of talking about that structure. And I don't have the intellect to go into it in spin that out in such a way that it will draw you in intellectually. So therefore, the way I teach is directly. I point at it, which is irritating. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. A lot of people will hear this and think, I'd rather study under Adyashanti or maybe, let's see, maybe I could study under Thich Nhat Hanh. That would be a good one. And I'm not making fun of those people. I mean, they're teachers for other people. They need to be there. So if you understand what this is, and you find yourself in a position where you're teaching someone, then you just have to teach as directly as you can with your motivation, meaning to help people, not interfere with them. Well, we're not going to meddle with anybody. I have permission to meddle with you. Am I doing a good job?
You're a little too good.
And so people are wired differently. Some people, with their practice, I can't think of any two people that I talk to as what you call students of mine who are anywhere like anybody else. Everyone is completely different. Every time I meet someone, they're just different than anyone. So the way I relate with them as best I can is to meet them where they're at, not try to get them to do something, not try to get them to stop doing something, unless they ask. If you make the mistake of asking me, what should I do? I'm probably going to tell you. Make sure that you really mean that. I might even say that. You really want me to tell you what to do? Well, not really. I just thought maybe you had a suggestion. I mean, I could kind of just, maybe you could go into retreat for a year. I don't think I've sent anybody into retreat for that long. I have recommended to people go into retreat. The last person was Sokuzan. She's in retreat now. But that was mutual. We both thought that would be a good idea for her. She's in retreat. I was sent into retreat. Yes.
Danny from the monastery in Back Creek has a question.
Good.
She asks, how can we respect someone else's confusion if we see them cause harm to other beings, especially those that are not able to defend themselves?
Yeah. Well, of course, it's very situational, as all those things are. So if it's hard to give a blanket statement to that, but if you see someone harming somebody else, it depends on who they are. If they're really tiny, then grab them. If they're really big, sneak up on them. But you can actually stop somebody. I mean, you need to be present. You need to make sure that it's a situation you can actually work with. You can stop someone literally. But if you see someone doing that kind of abstractly, like on an organization doing that to an individual or to other organizations or to groups of people through some kind of bigotry or prejudice, I really don't know. I mean, you could go and join something, but the problem with joining moveon.org or anything, not that you shouldn't join them, but the problem with doing that is you get pulled into that labyrinth of confusion where people are doing their best to help others, but they have not trained their minds. And so they have not trained their mind, the very ignoring of their own aggression. And you've heard me say this many times, and I know, Danny, you have too, that if you haven't, then if you don't know about that, then when you get around people who are aggressive, your own unexamined aggression starts to resonate with that. And the next thing you know, their aggressive vomit and your aggressive vomit get mixed. And the next thing you know, then it's really confusing, especially if there's a lot of threat, there's a lot of hope and fear, there's a lot of fear going around. It can be really challenging. So I send everybody back to the cushion. Go sit down, hold still, find out who you are. Look at your own aggression. look at your own mind, and then gradually you could find yourself moving out into the world. But I do it very slowly. That's why they have monasteries. That's why, Danny, why you're living in one. Just like I've said, simple. You're walking down the street and you see someone even if they're in their own yard and they have a stick and they're beating a dog, you don't think, I don't want to meddle. No, you go and take the stick away. I mean, perhaps, or something like that. You do something about it. Interrupt them. Wait a minute, what are you doing? What happened? What's going on here? You could do it lots of different ways. If there's a specific situation, Danny, that you're asking about, I could probably maybe address that. Less is better. It's better when I say less, I'm saying less action and more awareness. Less doing anything. There's already enough doing going on in the mind, pushing this, pulling that, guessing at this, guessing at that, reinterpreting this, elaborating on this. The mind is constantly elaborating. I shouldn't, I better, I shouldn't. There that goes again. Here I go again. Now I'm doing this, now I'm doing that. I was feeling better, now I feel like shit. It's just, and so take it to the cushion, sit down, hold still, find out who you are. Find out who you are before this body-mind complex goes back into the elements. It's going there. And that's not just pessimism. That's not just nihilism. That's the truth. As John Rinpoche said, I like to repeat this because it's so funny. He says, some of us are going to die soon, and the rest of us are going to die later. That's hilarious. It's so true. Some will die pretty quick, soon, and then the rest of us will die a little later.
Can we vote?
Huh?
Can we vote on which we want to be?
I don't know. I didn't hear him comment on that. Probably not. With that in mind, that's just talking about the three marks of existence: impermanence, suffering. Everything is distressed in some way or another, and if it's or it's covering it up so it doesn't know that it's distressed. And then there's no solid self that's occurring to it. It's emotion, feeling, suffering is happening. It's just not happening to a person, to an individual. And then, of course, there's impermanence. Anything that shows up, all compounded things, as the Buddha said, will vanish. All compounded things are coming apart. But who you are, your Buddha nature, is not compounded. It does not come from somewhere. It's not going somewhere. Body, minds come and go, come and go, come and go. Who you are, find out who you are, so that that aspect of your consciousness, sometimes called a spirit or a soul or Buddha nature, or call it karma core, whatever it is, regardless of what you call it. That if it gets laminated to the lifetimes, then it's called reincarnation. But if you see what this is, you won't laminate unless you do it out of the vow, which is the Bodhisattva vows to stay in samsara until all beings are liberated. Don't do anything unless you have to, especially that one. Then again, if nothing is separate, who's to stay in samsara? The other way of saying it is all beings are already liberated. This is an illusion. Yes.
So if when the Buddha awoke, he awoke to delusion, could one also say, if things are not separate, could one also say that he awoke to liberation?
Yes. Not separate. That's it. Fundamentally the same. As the other way of saying it is, Buddhas or enlightened beings and sentient beings or people who are confused and walling around in their passion, aggression, and ignorance are not separate. If you think they're separate, you'll continue to suffer, thinking that Buddhas are something way ahead of what you are. You're already the Buddha. It might take a while for you to see that. You won't see it if you continue to go to Walmart. You can go to Walmart if you want. Don't stay there very long.
In your scamp?
Huh? You go in your scamp and park in the lot. Just make sure you get permission. If you don't, they'll tow you. I would have towed you. You know what he said? Good thing you told me. I would have towed you. Did you think we're towed when he said that?
No.
Oh.
I thought punching you in the face.
He started punching him. Yeah, that would be appropriate. On some occasions, you'd be helping him. Right? Right.
Well, that brings up another question.
What?
You went to Dan's question.
Yes.
And you brought up the example of if somebody was beating the dog in the yard, you would go, you would say, an example of what are you doing, or however that situation would be met. You also say don't meddle. So what's the difference between responding to help and meddling?
Well, I think it has to be done situationally. I mean, you might be walking down the street and there might be 15 situations where somebody's doing this or that or the other thing where you would not like it, but you would look at it and something about that situation would just say, this is not time for you to be a hero. And another time is if you're operating out of your awareness and not out of judging. If you're judging people, if you're judging that person, you think that person is an evil person, you probably should stay away. Because you're going to bring your own unexamined aggression in there, and you could end up killing the person, or they could kill you. So you should. This is why there's such a thing called skillful means or upaya. You can't have skillful means unless there's wisdom, and there can't be wisdom as long as there's grasping at itself. If there's grasping at someone who can be right, who can be wrong, who can be a good bodhisattva, it just won't work. So probably shouldn't meddle. It'd be hard to walk and see someone abusing someone else and not come in and try to stop it. Might not be able to help it. So that's a hypothetical thing. It's unlikely to happen. But we see this happening in different forms all over the place. People hurting other people and abusing people and so on. But the causes and conditions that arise there are also dependent. There are no evil people. There's no, that's just a misunderstanding. Sure the hell looks like it, doesn't it? Looks like some people are just so wound up in themselves that they don't care. They're going to hurt others. What was the story? Didn't we hear that on the book that were on audio that were about the fellow who was killed? How did that story go? Preet Bharara. That was an interesting story. the fellow that he tried to kill, he didn't succeed in killing him. He was a Muslim and didn't succeed, and he lived, and that person who was caught went to prison, and then he came and tried to prevent his execution, even though he was the one that tried to kill him. It's a pretty powerful, pretty moving situation, and actually changed the person who was the murderer. They saw more deeply into the situation instead of continually buying into their prejudice and into their xenophobia and so on. Just having somebody that he had just tried to kill helping him. Very unusual. What was that book called?
Something about justice.
Yeah. Preet Bharara. Further questions?
Last week there was a advocacy group about inmates, and they were talking to the people in jail or in prison about the crime that they're being convicted for. And the question was, how long were you thinking about the act that actually got you in here? And most of the answers were between 1 and 10 seconds. Like, it wasn't premeditated for a long time, it was more impulsive, and this might have gotten life.
Yeah.
So it might be a really dire situation, or it could be like a minute situation in our everyday lives. But if we feel like that clock ticking 1 to 10 and we're gonna pop, and you see that, is there anything to do to interrupt that extreme momentum?
I think it's really hard to do that. I'm not saying it can't be done. I don't know everything and everybody, obviously, but I think it's very hard to do unless you've really looked at the jumpiness of the mind. You're jumping to this, jumping to that. Watch how we keep coming to, as I use the example I use, is the conclusions. You don't need to conclude anything. If you're always training yourself to conclude by your habitual pattern, just you see something, you immediately judge that. You see something else, you judge that. You see have a emotion come up, and you immediately conclude something about it. Conclude something. By continually concluding, we actually are exercising that aspect, that grasping part of the mind, and it's the grasping that actually gets us into that merry-go-round. So working with that first, that's why it's so important to sit down on the cushion and watch the grasping without buying it. Watch the grasping without fighting with it, and watch the grasping without ignoring it. It's not comfortable to do that. If you're doing sitting meditation, you're comfortable, you're probably doing it incorrectly. I'm not saying you can't sit and have periods of time where it's fairly smooth and easy, probably, but if you sit there long enough, eventually, because nothing lasts, eventually that smooth and easy situation will start to dive down into areas of your psyche, your consciousness, your alaya vijnana, your storehouse consciousness, where probably need to do some house cleaning. How do you do that? Awareness. No brooms involved. No vacuum cleaners. There's no trash carts. There's just awareness itself because of dependent origination, because nothing is separate from anything else. The awareness itself will do it. It may not feel, you may not get a credential out of it like, oh, I feel so much better now that I'm enlightened. That may not be part of it. Just like the Tibetan word for the meditation cushion is gomden. Get used to it cushion.
Question related to that. If a person could meditate 1 to 2 hours per day, is it better to do it all at once or half and half?
I don't know. I don't know if there's a better or worse. I would just say just do whatever you can. There's so many causes and conditions arising around that I couldn't give one blanket thing. The blanket thing I get is train your mind. Would be meditate. And for one person to meditate for weeks, months, years on end, no guarantee. There's no guarantee. The depth or the laminations, the karma that you're dealing with is different for each person. Some people might have some clarity fairly soon, and other people might not even get it in this lifetime. But you got to start somewhere. And this isn't to say there are more lifetimes. I have no idea. but it sure looks like there's something like that going on. So what last several years, I've recommended that people do block sitting, which you do some block sitting here. You do block sitting at the monastery, and people do it on their own in different places. And I started out really talking to inmates in prisons because I thought if they could just find some time, there's no way for them to do a retreat. There's just some way that they could sit down and do nothing for 4 hours but look at the wall. And so some of them would do it, some wouldn't. But then I started to teach that or recommend that to people to do that more because it just looked like a good. It seems like the radar of ego is still pretty much looking for credentials up to about 2.5, 3 hours. Fourth hour is pretty dreary. There's not much success happening there. And the ego mind, that part of the mind has kind of relaxed its attention, and just the raw attention seems to be happening there. So you can basically, that's when you actually, it's like you got a shovel. Use an obvious metaphor. In the first 3 hours, you walk around in circles with a shovel. And then the last hour, you start digging. But that first 3 hours is just, I have a shovel. It's for digging. I intend to dig. I'm going to dig. I'm big on digging. Those rhyme. Big dig, big dig, big dig. That's my mantra. Big dig, big dig, big dig. This is what the mind does. The mind finds something that can hang on to and starts to make it into a rhyme. Rhyming confusion is, we do various things like that. I'm not being particularly inventive. The ego mind is extremely inventive at staying hidden. You need to do it on a mala, a child's mala. Big dig, big dig. Big dig, big dig. So it's like we're wandering in circles, but then that last hour or somewhere in that area, just like eventually we just get worn out and we kind of look at the shovel or we look at and we think, I'm gonna, again, it's just a strong kind of a homely metaphor, but we just start to dig, we start to go down into what is this thing we call our mind, our consciousness. And the time leading up to that can be extremely painful.
Along the same lines, then are short periods like 30 minutes a day worthwhile then?
Well, yes, anything, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, anything, anytime you sit down and do nothing and look at it, it's worthwhile. And sometimes a 10-minute meditation can seem more, something happens during that's as strong as something that happened in 4 hours. So I'm just saying it seems to be all over the place. Shannon?
So I'm wondering if we're ultimately already awakened, we're already the Buddha.
Yes, we are.
We're one with everything. We're not separate.
Yeah.
Then what's the point of this illusion that we're in?
There's no point. It's just the nature of intelligence that it goes awry. If you go back to Maurikpa or Avidya, the first of the 12 links in the chain of existence, go back to that first. The image I like to use is, and it was with the help of Trungpa Rinpoche, it's like the beginning of the thing. If you need to look at it that way, just one vast openness, like looking across the desert. There's nothing happening at all. And then some hot and cold comes. Hot comes in, the contrast, some kind of contrast comes in. And it isn't a person, it isn't a cockroach, it isn't anything. It just comes in, and then you start to get spinning, you start to get little dust devils, little cyclones start up, and then the cyclone starts to draw leaves and branches and twigs and stones up into it, and it looks like someone. So that kind of Marigpa causes samskaras, which is the second form of the shutting down, things start to form, and then the next one is consciousness. And we're not sure how consciousness works, but it's something about that. It's like the consciousness that is digesting your food, the consciousness that is causing a tree to leaves. That's consciousness. There's consciousness in a chunk of granite. It can't be granite unless there's consciousness. If it weren't consciousness, it would just be a ball of cork. Everybody knows that. I'm just using it as it would be something else, but then it couldn't be something else. It would have to be consciousness. It couldn't be anything else. So our job, you could say, is to come into this incredible university called human existence and learn. And we've been coming and coming and coming, and you will continue as I'm not condemning anybody to anything. But it looks over here, from looking at this for a long time and being quite crazy, it looks like this will continue to happen unless you look at what it is. You can see that fundamentally everything that is occurring is illusory. That you are not separate from the Buddha. This is you studied Dzogchen. This is Dzogchen. Dzogchen teaching is the great perfection. It's already perfect. Don't argue. And if you do argue, even the argument is perfect. Even the worst pain that you can have is perfect. This is not some kind of airy-fairy taking something that's very negative and polishing it up so it looks good. It's not separate. It's non-dual. It's but for each person who is functioning as a human being or any kind of being, for each consciousness, we have to see that. Otherwise, we continue to roil around in our sense fields and pushing on some things and pulling on others and shutting down on others in order to promote some kind of self. You're right. There is someone, but you're not. But it's not somebody that you're separate from. It's the Buddha. It's the Tathagata, the enlightened one. Not separate. It's not theism. It's not about worshiping anybody, although it's taught that way sometimes. Go ahead. I saw your mouth open.
Well, I know it's pointless to ask why questions.
I like when. That's a good W question. Where? That's a good one. My favorite is what? What? My favorite is what? You're a terrible straight man. Go ahead.
Even this whole thing of reincarnation.
Yes.
Coming back, to
Illusion.
that isn't real either.
Not real.
So.
This isn't real. This
Right.
is not real.
But again, I just don't understand why. Why do we have to?
Why is a circular question? Why always has a because. What doesn't have a because? What is what?
Okay, well, okay.
Huh?
What happened when we went wrong?
We didn't go wrong. Nothing is wrong. It's a school. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing to correct. There's nothing to fix.
When we went blind.
When the consciousness downloaded into a separate organism and made the assumption that this organism is who I am. This is look at your hands. This is not you. There's no other than you can feel this. I'll give you an example. Here's your hand, okay? And I feel this, but the wall can't feel. So that's how we're separate. I feel. But your fingernails are like a wall because they don't have any nerve endings in them. So if that wall were made of fingernails, I rest my case. It's not separate. It's not separate, and it's already liberation. The divisions between the worlds, all the layers, all the bardos and everything they're all there because they're just fanned out everywhere, and there's living beings everywhere, not just us, but aliens, whatever you want to call consciousnesses that are on other worlds, not separate.
So is all of this illusory, everything, so what is real?
What do you mean by real? Not false?
Is there a duality to illusory?
It's part of it. The duality is the illusion, and the non-dual is the dual. So you have relative truth, plus and minus, up and down, back and forth, success and failure, all the duality you can think of. You can't have night without day. If you just had just night, you'd never know what day was. If you just had one thing, you'd never know. You can't have one thing. It always has to be something else. But those are not two. That's a simple thing. The simple thing is your right hand and your left hand. That's why we do this. Not two. Kind of a homely example, but it's like that. It's like we're taking the apparent separation of everything and we're bringing it together. We're respecting everything more. This is not something you're going to be able to understand in the fourth skandha. Although people try to do it, people write big long books about it, explaining the nature of this and the nature of that. So you can do some of that, but the fundamental understanding transcends all of that, transcends all the skandhas, transcends everything. And it's in our school, Yogacara or Zen, Chan, even Dzogchen, Mahamudra teachings is consciousness only, perception only. What you see is just a perception. It's not the perceiver, and it's not what is being perceived. It's just a perception. It's like a dream. Go ahead.
Is Buddha nature real?
It's probably the only thing that's real. Wink, wink. The whole idea of asking about real and unreal creates its own dilemma. It puts us into a situation where we just have to call on some philosophers to come in and solve this for us. So luckily I'm not a philosopher. I don't have a degree. I'm not smart. I don't say this as some kind of false humility. I'm just not very smart. It's a good thing. Because I'd be thinking about all kinds of stuff. I'm handicapped.
Yeah, so it's not so like mind blowing. So then, how do you just what do you do in your day to day life in this reality when everything you look at is illusion?
That's it. Don't accept it. Don't reject it. Don't look away. It's both real and it's unreal. Just like a dream is both real because you had the dream. It's unreal, like your elevator image you were telling me. It's real because you're there and you don't like that. That was a crazy dream. Who do you think you are having dreams like that? But you know how when you were having that dream, how really intense, and it's like the body wasn't there. What was it? You could say, well, was it some biological thing? We don't know. It doesn't matter for someone to try to say, well, the mind isn't in the body. People that go in and try to make something out of everything, it's just it's better off to just see directly what it is. If you see directly, then it won't matter if you're suffering or not. I mean, that's when I say that, I'm not saying it won't matter. Of course, you'll be suffering, but you'll understand what it is deeply. And you'll see that as one of the practices of a bodhisattva is when you have difficulty coming, instead of fighting with it or pushing on it, you say, give me this suffering and give me all the suffering in the world. Anyone who's feeling this way, I'll take it. So it's a way of working with relative truth in a way that you're no longer fighting with anything. There's no more warfare happening. And this doesn't mean that if you're if you're having you can only do that if you have some clarity about what this is. You can't. I'm not inviting anyone to go into negativity. Like Julie and I were talking about earlier about Tonglen practice. And I was, if people want to do Tonglen, they should do it. But I don't particularly teach it because it's drawing negativity into you. So, and I practiced it for many, many years and taught it to others because I was told to teach it to others by Trungpa. But I don't do that anymore because I don't want to. I'm not going to do that. People should just sit down and watch what moves and not try to invent some kind of a pretend bodhisattva.
With working with children, I try to have both myself and the child in my awareness. And then I can't like hear what they're saying. I get really confused and disoriented.
That sounds good.
So can you hold on to self and other without confusion?
No. But what you just said sounded really good. You should have just put a period right there. I got a whole bunch of other shoulds. You want to hear them? I just got a basket full of shoulds. I'm just saying that the very confusion that you were operating in there is actually, that's the treasure part of what you're talking about. Not separate. That's how you discover liberation. That's how you discover what's Trungpa Rinpoche called ordinary magic. Is you realize that the jewel that you're looking for is in the confusion. It's in the rubbish heap. Instead of looking at where do they store the jewels at, they're in the rubbish heap. Not to. So the very area that you're working with the child, using your awareness. I can't remember exactly how you characterized it, but I'm just saying that's it. Don't go any further than that. That's it. Just you don't have to stay there, but just notice the texture of that, the quality of that confusion as it arises out of you endeavoring to be with that child. That's what's important. If I were to be interpretive about it, I could say that and I'm not saying this is what's happening, but it's a way of looking at it. The very confusion the child is happening with the child because of your wish to help that child. That consciousness doesn't belong to anybody. So it's migrated into your consciousness. So you're with the confusion. You can't help someone unless you're with their confusion. If you sit back and have a prescription, then it's more like you're a surgeon. Nothing wrong with surgeons. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for surgeons. So, but that's a different way. When you're talking about the mind, that's a different area. We need to be very, very respectful to consciousness and the way it shows up as sanity or insanity or passion, aggression, ignorance, and so on. So it's great you can have these little teachers around you.
It is, and I guess the difficulty is I don't want to put a period on it. I get confused, and I want to have the thing to help them. I want an answer, and I want to know.
Stay with the confusion. Don't abandon the confusion for some kind of resolution. Don't conclude. Just include the confusion. And anybody's having negativity with anything, whatever you're having negativity with, please include it. Give it 20 minutes a day where you just include everything you've been fighting with and everything you've been disagreeing with. Include. I'm going to be, it's like it says in the Tibetan tradition, one of the things that practitioners, one of the slogans is, if it's better for me to be sick, let me be sick. Better for me to live, let me live. Better for me to die, let me die. You got to mean it. We don't necessarily want to die, but there's a willingness to be with whatever's happening. We're all done separating ourselves from the world and trying to get to some kind of better state than everybody else, including ourselves. Even our own life is no longer a contrast. It's not separate. You're just as you were the Buddha when you were 4 years old. When you realize that, you realize this has always been the case. It's like I sometimes say your grandmother did. And you realize it's always been true. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
So we'll stand and dedicate a minute.
May the miracles penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiro san chi chi son bu sa mo sa mo the 10 directions of the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita. Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist community, our places we practice, our families and friends and all beings. Feel everyone who is unable